Hey, what's up, everybody? It is Uncle Matt here, live on a Monday night. First time going live in quite a little bit of a while. I actually was looking through the previous stuff on the channel, and I think it's been like 4 months. I think I was in Mexico last time I did a live stream, which is pretty crazy. Obviously, life gets busy sometimes, and you don't have the opportunities to do some of the things that you enjoy doing. But we're back tonight, and unfortunately, we are back for one of the worst possible reasons to discuss the utter failure, the utter disgust that has been the Tennessee Titans for basically the last year and a half now. The Brian Callahan era mercifully has come to an end. It was announced this morning that the Titans were parting ways with head coach Brian Callahan after a year, one season and 5 games. I believe his final record was something like 4-19 total. It's been bounded all over the place today. Seen it a million times. I'll probably get it wrong there, but nonetheless, it was unfortunately probably past due. It finally had to happen. Kind of the right decision, but ultimately the biggest problem with the Tennessee Titans as of late is they found a way to make the right decision and somehow completely bungle and make themselves look stupid as they're actually making the right decision. Got the decision right, got the process wrong, I believe is one way you could put that there. So right out of the gates, I think everybody's reading the tea leaves on this. Everybody has got their, conspiracy ears up. There's been some loose reports that have sources saying this is the case, but I think pretty much everybody pretty quickly right away started to figure out that it seems like this was a decision made by Titans owner Amy Adams Strunk, not by the leadership of the football team, Chad Brinker, Bert Nihil, Mike Bergonzi. This seems like it was a handed down decision from her. And the biggest piece of evidence to that is that when the initial announcement was made of the firing, it did not include any news about who would be taking over as the interim head coach. Now, I'm sure there's examples where these type of announcements are made, and it doesn't always include stepping in will be interim coach X, A, Y, and Z. But I feel pretty confident more often than not, those two things usually go hand in hand in the announcement. You usually get told pretty quickly, we've had to make a move on, we've had to make a decision, we've had to make a change. Here's the game plan moving forward. Who's going to be leading the team in the interim until a full-time head coach is selected? That didn't happen. It did not happen for, I think the initial announcement came out around like maybe 10:30, 11, something like that. And we did not get a announcement about who was going to be the interim head coach till almost 3, 4 o'clock. The Titans were scheduled to have a press conference at 2:30, canceled that, moved it to 7:30 tonight. Like literally just ended. Reason I bumped back the stream, the reason we're going live right now is because I watched the press conference. I wanted to see what the representatives of the team that got trotted out there had to say for themselves, and really it was not much. It was definitely looked like Chad Brinker and Mike Bergonzi looked like two guys who have been scrambling to figure out what to do after, in theory, their boss, the owner, told them they had to fire Mike. There's too many Mikes at this team. That they had to fire Brian Callahan. Which I will say this. I told a couple people this today in discussing this decision and this thing is, okay, you can blame it Amy Adams Strunk and say, hey, she overreached, she's stepping over the line, telling the football people what decisions to make instead of just letting the football people run the football team. That's all fair and good. But even if this was an Amy Adams Strunk thing, even if she did step in and say, hey, you got to fire Brian Callahan, once again, that was the right decision. 2, the fact that Bergonzi and Brinker seem to have no backup plan, nothing already kind of lined up in terms of where they were going to go with the team. You based on what we've seen so far this season, they should have been getting their ducks in a row and being prepared for the possibility that Brian Callahan was going to have to be fired at some point in time. And it seems like they did not do that. Like, you can't obviously go start talking to, the coaches on the staff and say, hey, if anything goes south here, you'd be willing to step up and kind of step in and be the new interim head coach for the rest of the season. You can't really do that, but definitely feels like it's something you should have been a little bit more prepared for, to where it didn't take you like whatever it was, like 5 hours to announce who was actually taking over as the interim head coach. So didn't seem like they were prepared for this, which is a bad sign for them, because if you've seen this team play, if you've seen the execution errors, the game management errors, and you were not already thinking in your head as a leader of this team, hey, we'll try to see it out. We'll try to give it more time, but we might need to start thinking about replacements. If you weren't doing that, you're bad at your job. And I think Mike Bergonzi and Chad Brinker, unfortunately, might be bad at their jobs. They, stood up there. Chad Brinker said, we didn't see growth. We didn't see growth. If you did a shot every time Chad Brinker or even Mike Bergonzi, the one or two times he talked, said the word growth, you would be plastered on the floor right now because that was just their buzzword for this press conference. Every time the Titans do one of these stupid press conferences, which are happening way too often, obviously, there's always some dumb buzzword that they just repeat over and over again. And this one was growth. Weren't seeing growth. Weren't seeing growth. Weren't seeing growth. Weren't seeing growth. And that's fair. That's truth. That is probably the biggest downfall of Brian Callahan. Weren't seeing growth, and it's kind of a twofold thing when it comes to Callahan. I think players on the field did not seem to be progressing. Players that we have expectations for that we think should be getting better aren't. Cam Ward is the one that saw a spotlight on him being the first overall pick, the new quarterback of the team. Up and down season so far, hasn't really lit the world on fire. I'm not. A lot of people are like jumping ship on him. I'm not there yet. I mean, I'm well far away from doing that. I mean, I think he hasn't made the catastrophic errors that Will Levis did. He had one like right at the end of the game against the Raiders where he just randomly dropped the football. But I mean, what are you going to do in that spot? We were already losing that game one way or the other. But yeah, the progression of the players themselves hasn't been there under Brian Callahan. Brought in his dad to be this offensive line guru to fix the offensive line problems, which has been the Titans' biggest problem for whatever it's been, like 4 or 5 seasons now. And every year the offensive line somehow seemed to continue to get worse. Bill Callahan last year, terrible offensive line, signed some free agents, drafted another offensive lineman, put people wherever, and it still got worse and worse this year, did not improve. So the product on the field was not progressing. The players themselves were not progressing. But the bigger issue, and I think they were kind of alluding to this more than that, is Callahan himself as a coach did not take the next steps, not take the progressive steps. They kind of said in the press conference, when we hired him, knowing he was a first-time head coach, knowing, his experience level, we thought he had the tools, had the ability, had the intelligence, had the, base to build from to grow and to be an head coach, that maybe he wasn't the finished product. Maybe he wasn't going to step in and revolutionize the team day one, but he would grow into being a great head coach in this league. And that progress, that progression, that growth. Now I'm saying growth every 2 words. I got to stop doing that. Wasn't happening with Callahan. And that's why, game 1 this season, I was like, we got to fire him. When he mismanaged that Broncos game so badly, the end of the first half situation, the not knowing the rules on the elbow and bounds. Everybody in the bar knows elbow equals 2 feet. Somehow Brian Callahan didn't know that. That first game, I just saw that was the biggest issues I had with him this first season are still there and maybe are even worse. His game management, his management of the clock, his decision-making and challenges, his situational awareness in football. It was not there all last year. It's probably the biggest complaint I had about him last season. I gave him the benefit of the doubt because Will Levis was such a disaster, but came back this season still there, still a problem, still an issue. What my conclusion is when it comes to Brian Callahan, how he got the job, what went wrong, where it didn't work. I think he's probably a guy. You look at his track record, you look at his history. He's been around a lot of good quarterbacks. He's been around a lot of smart head coaches, a lot of smart offensive coordinators. But he at no point in his career was ever the decision maker. He was never the offensive coordinator. He was never in charge of anything. He was never a decision maker. He was always position coach, senior assistant, offensive coordinator in Cincinnati who didn't actually call plays, which, what do you do then? We're still trying to figure that out with Nick Foles, the current offensive coordinator of the Tennessee Titans. And I think he just didn't. He's probably the guy who's learned a lot of football, who understands a lot of football. If he was like a professor teaching a class in college about football, he'd probably have some really good lectures and some really good speeches, and you'd feel really smart from listening to him talk. But in practical application, just did not have that part of the equation, just did not know how to execute when things didn't go exactly to plan. Didn't seem to be able to adjust his scheme to the personnel he had or issues that were arising during the game. Obviously, time management has been a huge disaster for him since day one. And I think the reason they stuck with him for this season was the idea of, like they said, thought he would progress, thought he would learn from the mistakes and some of the issues of his first season, thought he would grow into being a more fully developed, he would develop into being a more well-rounded coach who could take the knowledge he had, the understanding he had of the game, and start to be able to more properly apply it in actual game situations and actual game matchups. And that just did not happen. Just is we've seen it every single game this season how he's mismanaged some form or fashion of the game. And I mean, I honestly would have fired him after the Cardinals game. We won that game. It'd be so hard to fire a coach after a win, but when I saw his like post locker room speech where he's like, if we keep playing that way, we're going to start stacking wins. And to an extent, in that, in the post game speech to the team, you got to be a little rah-rah. You got to be a little fire them up, whatever. Then I listened to the OTP, the Official Titans podcast, which they do about 20, 30 minutes with him every Monday, kind of recapping the game, kind of talking through stuff. And in that, he was talking like they had performed some great performance. The team had just grown and taken steps forward, and the execution, the game plan, things that hadn't been working were starting to work. Things were starting to click, that the team was progressing forward, just like completely unwilling to acknowledge the fact that we only won that game because the Cardinals had an all-time meltdown, like a full-on implosion. Like if the Cardinals don't make 17 different mistakes, that ends up in a blowout and he gets fired. And when I was listening to the press conference Monday and hearing him just be seemingly oblivious to that's how we won the game, I was really just like, this guy is so tone deaf and so checked out to what is actually happening on the field, what is actually going on in the process of an NFL game. I would have fired him after that game, after hearing that press conference, after hearing that podcast appearance. I'm like, I guess it's hard to come out and say, hey, we got lucky there. We got to figure out a way to, take that game out of the Cardinals' hands and, put it in our hands. I don't know what you say there, but you don't just act like you put on some great performance that the team is finally turning a corner when you played like crap and only won because the other team somehow played crapper. Is that a word? More crappy? I don't know. It's rough. Rough start to the season. I mean, obviously, I don't think, these type of changes don't typically lead to massive improvements. We're not going to win the Super Bowl by switching over to Mike McCoy as our new interim head coach for the rest of the season. You'd hope you get a little bit of a bump, a little bit of bounce, but it's always kind of like a catch-22. Like, does Mike McCoy get a little fire lit under the team? Does he change a few things around, move a few pieces here and there, and you grab a few wins that maybe you wouldn't have if you kept forward with Callahan? Great. But then all of a sudden, at this point, would you rather be at like a 2-3 win team and have a better draft pick, or would you want to be like a 6, 7, 8 win team and be picking middle to late in the first round? It's a catch-22 where it's like, okay, we're getting rid of the problem. We're getting rid of Callahan. It's been a pretty big disaster at the top there, but we're pretty much just coming right back, and just now maybe we'll be just a little bit better and make our draft stock a little bit worse. I don't know. Stuff in there. I mean, I've seen some stuff where like the people who were trying to like find the silver linings in Mike McCoy, who's been a mediocre to poor head coach in his previous run with the Chargers, is that just he's having an experience as a head coach that Callahan didn't. He'll maybe clean up some of just the complete mismanagement issues that were plaguing the team, and maybe because the roster should be playing better than it really is. I mean, it's still not a great roster, but I mean, it's definitely better than what it's shown this season. Maybe just having a more experienced person at the wheel can clean up some of the management issues that have cost us points, that have cost us drives, that have cost us issues. Mike McCoy himself did not speak at the press conference tonight. Another indicator, another sign that him being selected as the interim was kind of a scramble, late-minute decision. They even said in the press conference that he would speak tomorrow, and they were asked about, like, is the rest of the staff staying on board? Are there going to be additions? Are there going to be subtractions? They said that's going to be a lot, under Mike's guidance as the new interim head coach, and he will address that stuff tomorrow. So there's a lot of moving parts, a lot that's still happening, because this clearly was a scrambled last-minute decision, probably forced upon the leadership by Amy Adams-Strunk. But once again, they probably should have been a little bit more prepared to have to make this decision given how things have been going this season for the Tennessee Titans. But yeah, here we are. Here we are. Obviously, a lot of people have already posted, names to watch for the next Titans head coach, and it's just way too early in the process for that. Some of the people, we're so early in the season, there's guys who are like offensive coordinators or whatever for other teams around the league that they're like, oh, what a great season he's had. It's like they could fall apart in the next 3 weeks and they're off the list. I think we got to go somebody with, experience. I don't know if it necessarily has to be somebody with head coaching experience, but I've said it from pretty early on in the Brian Callahan era, that I think the biggest mistake wasn't necessarily hiring him, but hiring him and allowing him to build a staff that surrounded him with so little inexperience when he himself was so inexperienced. First-time head coach who's calling offensive plays for the first time. offensive coordinator who he's not having to call plays, but he's being an offensive coordinator for the first time. Denard Wilson, first time ever defensive coordinator. He's done okay. He's had his ups, he's had his downs. He's been pretty good. But last year, first time ever special teams coordinator. That guy got fired. The one good decision Brian Callahan's probably made is firing that guy this past offseason, bringing in Bones Fossil. I really like the only person that, last year with any real experience on that coaching staff was his dad. And I think his dad, I don't know what's going on with him. I don't know how he went from being this offensive line guru to somehow making the Titans offensive line even worse than it had been previously. Mike McCoy now had come in as somebody with a little bit of experience, but too little too late for Brian. And it just did not seem he was learning. It did not seem like he was taking, anything from the mistakes he was making. And I think the biggest thing is this is a lot of comparisons made between this period and the Ken Wisenhunt period. I still would put the Ken Wisenhunt period as being so much worse just because that Mettenberger season is got to be the worst season in Tennessee Titans history. That roster, that period was so much worse. I mean, the receivers we had back then, Bishop Sankey of it all. I mean, we still have good players on this team. It's not a great roster, but, Tony Pollard is pretty solid. Tajay Spears has some bursts. Chig Okonkwo's look like he's coming along the last couple of weeks. Calvin Ridley looked like maybe he was getting out of his funk, and then he pulls a hamstring. Some promising young players that have shown flashes but have been inconsistent. Defense obviously has been decent to really good at times this season. So there's pieces there to where it should not have been a disaster of a team. It should not have just been falling apart the way it was falling apart. And ultimately, that's what probably cost Brian Callahan his job. But I think, comparing it to the Wisenhunt era, I think this roster is a little bit better. I think this roster has potential to improve more. I think a lot of the Wisenhunt era teams were just bad rosters the last year. You got Mariota, got a few pieces, but the bigger thing with Wisenhunt was he was stubborn. He was unwilling to adjust his scheme to change because he thought he was so much smarter than everybody. And the biggest difference between him and Brian Callahan is he was trying to make sure you knew he was smarter than you. He was, pardon my language here, Wisenhunt was a dick. He was a dickhead. He thought he was smarter than everybody else. He thought he knew better than everybody else. Didn't matter that we were 4-19 under his leadership. It was all something else. His great offensive scheme was perfect. It was just execution. It was this, that, and the other. He took no blame. He took no accountability, and he just acted like everybody else was an idiot for thinking he could possibly be the problem. Now, Brian Callahan, I don't know that he didn't have the willingness to change. Once again, I don't think he had the practical application of the knowledge of the game. I don't think he knew one way that football should work, and when that didn't work, he just didn't have a plan B and didn't know what to do. Whereas Ken Wisenhunt was more like, I'm smarter than you. My stuff should work. If it's not working, it's something else. It's not me. Callahan was a nice guy by all accounts. He was, friendly in loss, friendly in defeat. The one time he screamed at Will Levis is probably the meanest he's been. But, Wisenhunt, jerk all the way around. So, I'll take a nice guy who doesn't know what he's doing over a jerk who doesn't know what he's doing any day of the week. So, for me, the Wisenhunt area is still, worse, still a bigger disaster. I have way worse memories of that. And I think maybe it's just recency bias. You're always a lot of people are always going to defer to whatever is happening in the moment is the worst thing ever. But it's pretty bad. I think the bigger thing, if you want to make the argument this little period is worse, I think the top-down leadership is also pretty bad right now. Rustin Webster, the GM back then, was also terrible. Steve Underwood we had back in the day as a team president, and everybody could always kind of lean on him. He seemed like the one guy who always kind of knew what he was doing. He's had to come in and out of retirement a few times to fix the team. And Amy Adams-Strunk wasn't quite as involved at that point in time. In the early days of her taking over the controlling ownership of the team seemed to be pushing things in the right direction, but we've gone off a cliff in the last 2 or 3 years under her leadership. So maybe it's just that the whole organization feels bad right now, whereas maybe in the Wisenhunt era, it was just bad roster, bad coach. I don't know. But that's probably, honestly, that's the most frustrating thing about this team is if you're saying, we fired that coach, that was one of the biggest problems we had. Fix that moving forward. Well, people in charge all seem to be idiots. They all seem to not know what they're doing. They're going to make another poor choice when they hire the next head coach, and it's going to be a disaster all over again. So it's all bad right now. It all sucks right now. I may have talked myself into thinking this is the worst era in Titans history, but Brian Callahan has been fired, so at least we have, something. I wouldn't even say to look forward to. I'd say we have, something that makes it at least something not interesting, intriguing. Maybe there's something to kind of morbid curiosity about what changes, what improvements might happen under Mike McCoy. Morbid curiosity. That is a great way to describe it. With Brian Callahan out and Mike McCoy taking over as the interim coach, it's gone from complete depression, not even wanting to watch the games, to at least a morbid curiosity in what might happen. I think the biggest timing of this, and I had said before the season, I thought if they were going to bet when Brian Callahan would get fired, I had a feeling it would be somehow tied to our upcoming game this Sunday. We play the New England Patriots, who are coached by former Titans coach Mike Vrabel. And I kind of thought, maybe he'll get a win or two to start the season. Maybe there'll be enough to give him some rope to hang himself. He'll get to the Patriots game. We'll get embarrassed by the Patriots. Amy Adams-Strunk will get all pissy and call up from Houston and say, you got to fire him now. I think that was part of it. I think she saw that game coming and said, I don't want to have this guy get embarrassed and have my team get embarrassed by Vrabel and then have to fire this guy and make it look like it was an emotional reaction to that. And this was just a pre-emotional reaction as much as anything. If you go back to probably the live stream I probably did when we hired Brian Callahan, I'm always going to lean on the side of optimism. I'm always going to try to find the silver linings, the bright spots, the hopeful spots. I was a big fan of Vrabel. I definitely, in the moment when he first got fired, thought it was a terrible decision, a stupid thing to do. But managed to talk myself into some of the talking points, about his lack of collaboration, his lack of ability to kind of modernize his approach to the game. I don't know if, any of that would have ever gotten better with Vrabel. I don't know if he'd reached his ceiling here and we were just, going to be a good team, but never a great team, never a Super Bowl team under him. I still think that maybe that's the case. I don't know. Certainly looks like it's going pretty good for him up in New England right now. But the one thing you can say without a shadow of a doubt is the last season and 4 games, 5 games we've had so far this season, would have been much better if Mike Vrabel was the head coach. He would not have been as big of a disaster, been as big of a catastrophe, an unwatchable product on the field is what Brian Callahan gave us. Because, Callahan's biggest weakness was arguably Vrabel's biggest strength. Vrabel, much like Jeff Fisher, the other most successful coach in Titans history, knew the playbook inside and out, knew game management inside and out, knew the little tricks, little wrinkles, little ways to manipulate the game. It wasn't some offensive guru who called plays, never called plays in his life, really. He just came in, knew how to lead a team, knew how to lead players, knew how to manage a game. And, we decided that wasn't enough. We wanted something that maybe could elevate and take a team to an even higher level. Hired the wrong guy. And here we are. So back to square one. Another Titans firing, another semi-rebuild, semi-restructuring on the way. And I don't know what to say else other than what we've already said here. It's shambolic. It's a catastrophe, and it continues to be so. So we'll see what they do, moving forward. Obviously wouldn't expect any kind of movement on the head coaching front until the end of the season, unless they hire somebody like I know a lot of people have been mentioning Mike McCarthy, the former Packers and Cowboys coach, somebody that they might lean towards, pretty smart offensive mind, guy who's had, pretty decent track record in the NFL. Never, he kind of is almost like an offensive version of Mike Vrabel to an certain extent. His teams were always pretty good. His teams were always competitive, but outside of I think he won 1 Super Bowl with the Packers, but it's almost like, you had Aaron Rodgers all that time. Then in Dallas, you had some pretty good teams throughout that period, and you never quite could get over the hump and win more than 1 Super Bowl. Good coach, but is there a ceiling to him? I don't know. I only mention him because he's not working right now. So if he is somebody they could, in theory, still don't think they would do it in season, but that's, I guess, one in theory they could move faster on than, trying to hire an offensive coordinator from another team or, special teams coach, defensive coordinator, whatever from another team. So we'll see what happens. Obviously, we'll continue to talk about it and discuss it here on the channel because unfortunately this is our lot in life. Should have hired this Brian Callahan. Should have hired the Brian Callahan that's coaching the boys in gold, that's coaching Nashville SC, because doing some good things. This is what happens when you hire the right Callahan. U.S. Open Cup champions. And there's been a lot of people pointing out A lot of people pointed out at some of the recent, like the trophy celebration, the watch party they had for the final at Geodis Park, put a good product on the field, engage with the fans, do things the right way, the fans will come. And the Titans fans have been turning away in droves. You go to Nissan Stadium for the last 2 years, I don't know if there's been a game in the last 2 years that you would necessarily know was a Titans home game. Because, we're becoming a tourist town. That's a big part of it, obviously. But Titans fans don't want to go to the games. They don't want to see this crap that's been put on the field. They don't believe in the team. They don't believe in the coach. They don't believe in the structure. They don't believe in it at all. So somewhere along the way, somebody's got to start making the right decisions. I don't know if it's Chad Brinker. I don't know if it's Mike Borgonzi. I kind of think it's probably not. It's definitely not Amy Adams Strunk. The one good thing she can do, is put somebody in charge who knows what they're doing and then just kind of back away. And I think she's tried to do that, but then she has these little emotional outbursts where she jumps back in. And maybe I think the people she's been hiring and trusting kind of suck too. So it's kind of, yeah. And people complain, like Paul Karski was like, where's Amy Adams Strunk? Why isn't she here right now? Why isn't she here right now? And I get it. Clearly this was probably a decision that came from her. She should have some kind of appearance, some kind of, statement, some kind of presence. But at the same time, look at the Cowboys. Look at the Colts before Jim Irsay passed away. Look at, some of these other teams that have a front-facing owner who's always in the media, who's always talking, who's always, taking on too much responsibility, who's always got their fingers in the mix too much. The fans that have those teams, that have those owners, hate that situation. We have an owner who doesn't even come to games. She just chills down in Houston and does whatever she wants. Maybe pops her head and every once in a while goes, hey, fire that guy. But for the most part, she tries to be hands off, but sometimes just, gets the best of her. It's a sad state of affairs, and it's really hard to see a good path forward. But, like I said earlier, I'm sadly find ways to be optimistic in even the worst of times. So, I'm hopeful Mike McCoy can maybe make the season at least, once again, morbid curiosity that he can maybe do something a little different. And then I'll find a way to talk myself into whoever's the new full-time head coach and why they're going to get everything right when so much has gone wrong over the last 2.5 years. But that's it for now. Just a rant, a ramble, just sharing my thoughts, kind of going all over the place about the decision that was a long time coming. I think pretty much right out of the gates, you could see last season that Callahan just didn't have it. Seeing that new head coaches hit the ground running and do so well, there's not many coaches that have just been catastrophes and turned it around. I think the one example recently that a lot of people pointed to, and I even heard this brought up in comparison, is Brian Callahan isn't going to be this guy, is Dan Campbell, the coach, Lions. Maybe it was his second season. They were in a really rough spot. They had a rough start to the first 2 years and just it wasn't going well. He was on the hot seat. Things weren't going good. And then he kind of started to string some things together. Some things started to click. And Lions have been one of the best teams in football for the last few years. But I think the just game management, in-game errors, the just lack of fundamental understanding of how to execute a game plan, not that I follow the Lions very closely, but those didn't seem to be issues that Campbell was ever having. It seemed to be other things. And Callahan has those issues. And they didn't get better from one season to the next. And it looked like they were getting worse, if not better. So, is what it is. He's gone. His dad went with him. Good riddance to both. They were both dragging the team down. But once again, nice guy. Super nice guy. I feel bad that, it didn't work out because, if somebody's a jerk, if somebody's an a-hole, you like to see him go down, like J-Rob. So happy he got fired. So happy he has not got another job because he posted this Instagram a couple weeks ago being like, oh, guess it's all still my fault. Yeah, it is. We're still trying to fix the roster that you screwed up so bad, you idiot. There's a reason nobody's hired you in 4 years since you got fired, you moron. Jerks like that deserve to be fired, deserve to be gone. Brian Callahan, nice guy, just doesn't have what it takes to be a head coach at this point. And maybe, he could be one of those guys who goes off, recommits himself, learns from his mistakes, but it didn't seem like he did that from year 1 to year 2. So I don't know if that's ever going to happen for him long term, but he's got a long history in the game. He's got a lot of connections, a lot of networks. So don't really feel bad for him getting fired because I'm sure he'll get a job right away and be making, millions upon millions of dollars for many years to come. And he'll be just fine. So didn't work out here. Sucks for us. Way more than it sucks for him. We move on. Sunday, home game. Tennessee Titans welcome Mike Vrabel, the New England Patriots, to Nissan Stadium. Bet that's going to be a fun one. I'll be there. I'll make a vlog. and we'll all be sad together. Mike McCoy era begins Sunday. Join me for it. Subscribe to the channel, turn the bell on for notifications so you don't miss that game day vlog or any other content. I'm going to try to get back into doing live streams. Obviously, for a while, me and my guy, Wormy, we were running the 615 Locker Room podcast, and that was kind of where I was doing a lot of my sports talk, a lot of my stuff that I traditionally had done on the live streams here on the channel, because I was trying to, focus on putting that type of stuff on the podcast. But ultimately, my schedule, my life, my work, just the stuff that I do in real life outside of YouTube just got to be the point where we just could not keep a schedule. 100% my fault. And I think the biggest thing with trying to do a podcast thing as much as anything is being, on time, being regular, being consistent. So we've got to put that on pause for a little bit, when life kind of settles down for me a little bit, when I have a little bit more regularity in my life, maybe we'll jump back in and try to get that back up and running. But in the meantime, I would like to try to do these a little bit more regularly because I do have fun doing this. I like just getting on here and talking and sharing my thoughts, whether anybody watches or not. It's fun for me. And that's all this is. This is almost like a therapy session for me talking through my issues with the Tennessee Titans, with Nashville SC, with Manchester United, with professional wrestling, with anything else. This is my therapy. Maybe I need to do this a little bit more often. So stay tuned for that. Subscribe for just whatever I post on the channel. Anything. Hey, me and Justa, we got a nice vacation coming up. I think it's 24 days away. So it'll be a nice new vacation vlog at a brand new all-inclusive resort that we've never been to before. So that'll be fun. Always fun stuff popping up on the channel from time to time. So stay tuned for all that. Also, there'll be a Nashville SC vlog this week. We got decision day, final home match of the regular season. Inter Miami, the glorious Messi and friends come to town. Stay tuned for that. More here on the channel. Appreciate everybody watching. Tighten up, I guess. And Vive Esperance.